good morning, and welcome to Middle Earth Readings. I am Maggie Rose Cunningham. I am your host, as always, looking at the movements of the planets through the runic wheel. And for those of you who are able to join me live, looking at what your rune of the week is and how you can work with it to align powerfully with your destiny, fulfill your heroic purpose, and hopefully have a bit of fun in life on the way. So we have got 3 planetary movements for us to look at this week. Is that right? No, 4. 4 planetary movements for us to look at this week. But the sun and the moon are actually going to be in the same room. It's always a very powerful place to be. So we have Tia's chariot. So Tia's chariot is the Roman equivalent of Mars. Is moving into Tewaz. So Tewaz is actually Tia's rune. So we've got a really, really strong synergy between Tia and Tewaz that we're going to be looking at. We have Frigg's chariot entering Bacana. So Frigg, the queen of the heavens, she is also an earth goddess, so she unites those 2 realms. And she is in Bacana, which is the rune of the divine feminine. So again, very strong alignment between the planet and the rune in which it finds itself. Then we have Suna's chariot is moving into Largus here, the rune of water. So we've got sun and water, so fire and water, which I love it because it's my sun rune. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about Largus. And we've got a new moon in Largus as well. So that Largus energy, that watery energy, that energy of renewal is very, very strong for us. So I can see hello to everybody who's already saying hello in the chat and sharing your runes for the week. Apologies that I'm a little bit late. I feel as if in the Birth Runes Soul Journey program, we have just been looking at our north and south nodes, the pathways of mastery, let's call them. And I feel as if I'm being invited into the mastery pathway of dealing with unexpected minor tragedies in life at the moment, which is not an actual pathway, just to be clear. However, for those of you who are on the mastery pathway of divine timing, please send me any answers on a postcard direct to Biggleswade in Bedfordshire, because I need some help with my divine timing at the moment. So let's go a little bit deeper then into our 4 planetary movements for this week. So an overall theme that has certainly come, particularly from Tia's chariot moving into Tewaz and Frigg's chariot moving into Bacano, is one of how important it is for us to be ourselves, more than anything else. And we know that if we look over, the age of enlightenment and modern Western philosophy, this idea of the individual, the championing of the individual over the collective, has been really, really important and has come with its own pitfalls. So I think it's important to recognise that the paradigm that we're moving into is what I think about as being like a third age paradigm, and I'll mention a little bit more about that in a moment, where we are bringing together different forces. It's saying that we've had these forgotten, and yet we know about them still, that cultures of collectivism, where the few, that's not what I'm looking for, where the many, they come together, and there is this idea of sort of equality, and we can, obviously that's still there in the world today, but there are some problems with that, and there are some problems with championing the individual over the collective as well. And what the new paradigm that is inviting us into is a sense of being able to do both, of having the maturity as a species to be able to do both, and to say it's not always simple, and we have to tap into our wisdom that allows us to choose the right thing in the moment, and recognise that the right answer in one context is not the right answer in another context. And so this idea of being yourself, being more important than anything else, is recognising that every single one of us has a contribution to make, and that those contributions are not the same. That everyone, that collective, the collective has a contribution to make, and because everybody's contribution is unique, they are all precious. So we don't have this sense of valuing just the individual or valuing just the collective. What we're being invited into is a sense of saying every person has a contribution, and it is worthwhile and right and good to give each other the opportunity of stepping into that, of being fully expressed, of having time to explore that and bring that contribution into the world. So what can you do in this time around this week and these coming 2 weeks, and particularly the new moon in Lagos as well will continue that energy too, to step more fully into that sense of who am I and what am I here for? And I'd like you to do that from a place not of going, what am I here for, that's going to be really knackering and depleting, and it's actually, what am I here for that would bring me joy and happiness and pleasure? And even if that feels a little bit weird and it feels like, well, does the world really value that in this moment in time? Is that, what the world needs? Everyone contributes their bit, is what the gods are via the planets asking us to step into. Now, the other thing that these planets are doing is they brought into, to my mind, I mentioned this idea of the third age. So all of the runes that we are looking at this week are within the third family of runes. So they come in the last 8 runes in the Elder Futhark. So 8 means family, and there are 8 runes in each, just to confuse us. Which is this place of bringing together different ideas and finding the wisdom within them. It's the interplay between them. It's all about integration, maturity. They're not always being a perfect answer. So all 3 of those runes come within that. So with Tyr's chariot, which is going to be coming in on the 25th, moving into Tewaz, Tyr's rune, the rune of action. The word that you'll see for those of you who follow the Instagram that accompanies this is I am the sword. Which is that idea of the contribution. I am the sword. So this is what I contribute. I am going to be the one to take action. And Tyr is asking us that. But what he's saying within that is to bear in mind that the sword changes, or the way that we operate as the sword can change all of the time. And when we think about this idea of integrating, Tyr doesn't try to do everything himself. And he looks at the problem, he says, how do I fit into this problem? So originally Tyr was Twisto, this great sky god, huge sovereign god. And then he changes and he becomes a warrior instead, this calling forth the warrior spirit. And in so doing, at some point, Tyr is no longer the sovereign deity. Odin is the sovereign deity. And the thing is, because Tyr is in the third date, he is mature enough to recognise, it's okay, I don't need to be the king. I'm fulfilling my purpose, and that is the most important thing I can do in order to stand in my sovereign power. Odin may well be on the throne, but his value is no greater than mine, because I'm also fulfilling a purpose. And the purposes we know, or one of the purposes that we know that Tyr fulfills, is this binding of the Fenris wolf. He befriends the Fenris wolf, and then he says, I will bind the Fenris wolf when it comes to that point. And he knows that not only is that an essential thing that must happen, and he recognises that must happen, but he recognises that both for the collective but also for himself, he is the one that needs to do that, because the Fenris wolf is his friend. He would betray everything that he stood for if he let anybody else do that to the Fenris wolf, other than him, because he knows that he's culpable. And as he has taken that decision, he stands in his responsibility and he says, I know the Fenris wolf needs to be bowed. He is my friend. I am the only one who's going to do this. And he does that. So sometimes it's taking those difficult decisions, but it's also about saying, somebody else will be doing the other bit that I'm not doing. Now this comes through with Frigg as well, with Frigg and Bacano. So Frigg is moving into Bacano the next day on the 26th. There's our Bacano rune. And yes, that is a cat moaning and wanting to be held. And she is, again, this sovereign who values allyship and recognises that she is far stronger working in a collective than she is working on her own. So she has the Aesignor, who are her handmaidens, and we often work with them as being the 12 Aesignor. So for those of you who've done your birth runes with me, her Aesignor are the patronesses, the half mistresses of each of the halves that your birth runes fall within. And the Aesignor each take a facet of sort of operation that means that Frigg is able to achieve so much more in collaboration with them. And she is not diminishing them or saying, I'm in charge and I'm going to decide everything. she works in collaboration with them. And she also has a very interesting relationship with Freya, who, you know, we can also see, obviously she's a really important aspect of the divine feminine. In recognising that, my own personal understanding when I work with Frigg and when I work with Freya is that Frigg recognises Freya's queenness. So even though Frigg is the queen of Asgard, where Freya finds herself, you know, she finds herself there, and there are many reasons why she needs to stay there, Frigg does not seek to diminish Freya and say, I'm the queen and therefore you are not. Because she is strong in her own sense of purpose, you know, what it is that I am here to do. Seated on this throne, I have been placed on this throne with Odin for this purpose. Freya has other stuff that she's going to be doing, which is just as important because we're all contributing. And so we have that sense as well. And then we have Suna's chariot in Laguz. Now, Laguz is my sun moon, as I've said, so I'm particularly fond of it. And it does, you know, it brings that there is a lot of life force, a lot of energy, a lot of creativity that comes with it. It supports us in our seership. It's one of Frigg's runes, so this rune is the rune of the divine feminine, but Laguz is often seen as being like her spindle, the way that she weaves weird. It has that sense of, it connects us in with destiny and our ability to co-create with destiny. And it's a rune that acts as a gateway between life and death in particular. So if you think about wishing wells, and you know, these pools filled with darkness, you know, that we know that water is both essential for life, and yet when we find ourselves within it, we drown, obviously, which isn't a good thing. So it's this dual force, which again sits very nicely within the third 8, that it is both able to represent life and death, and so both come in. And so what Laguz is offering for those of us who are feeling like, okay, you know, I do want to step forward, I do want to take my stand, I do want to contribute, or I do want to let go of the things that actually aren't mine to tend to, and be okay with that, and not be bound by society's understanding of, you know, what makes me successful or sovereign or powerful or any of those things. If those are things that you need to release at the moment, then Laguz is a great rune to work with to do that. Now, bear with me one moment, because I didn't put down on my little list the exact dates, and I don't want to get them wrong for you. So we've got Suna's chariot moving into Laguz is on the 28th. So you've got a bit of time, it's towards the end of the week, and then we start to move into that. And it does bring with it leadership as well. This idea of being brave enough to take risks, to go out, you know, onto the waters. So similar to Tyr in that sense. It does ask us to do that, to sort of claim your power, you know, and to go into your next growth zone. That might be a very good way of looking at it for Laguz, is, you know, what is my next growth zone? And then you can work with the Laguz rune, you can work with it energetically, you can chant its name, you can work with water, you know, when you're washing your face and you're taking your shower, whatever it is that you want to do, and you can say, you know, I'm ready for my next stage of growth. And you can ask the Laguz rune to help you to do that by releasing, you know, back into the waters anything that you don't need that's going to hold you back, and by bringing you that vitalising life force. And then on the 30th, just 2 days later, we have the new moon in Laguz, which I like as well, because we've got a bit of Beltane energy there, so there's like fertility there as well, and Laguz is such a powerful rune for fertility and potency. And the new moon is saying, you know, this is the time to step into new beginnings. So you've got a couple of days where you're like, oh, you know, I'm asking Laguz to help me and support me, and I'm saying I'm ready. And then the new moon is a really great opportunity to be saying, okay, I'm going to set this as my intention. Because it's the new moon, you can do strong intention setting, but there's also an opportunity for releasing, because it's still in its sort of, you know, its dark and crescent phase. And then your intentions will build through to the full moon in May as well. So really nice energy, and it allows you that bit of time for slow and steady growth. So I think that is all I wanted to say. No, that is not all I wanted to say. So I said I was going to be talking about the third age a bit more. So I mentioned that all 3 of our runes for this week sit within the third 8. And I've talked about integration, collaboration, accepting competing truths, and saying, well, sometimes I have to, you know, it's contextual. You know, sometimes these are contextual, and sometimes one person can be championing and supporting one truth, while my job is to champion and support a different truth, and that's okay with me. I don't need them to agree with me. And this is where I've been working on looking at the eights, the 3 eights. And it never ceases to amaze me every time I go back to them and I go, oh, this is an interesting new angle on this. So the first eight is so much about belonging. It's about understanding the rules, about being nurtured, about feeling safe, about starting to understand yourself and your own impulses and your own urges and the raw, primal, emotional, physical laws, as well as then, how to speak, with Anne Suzerain, for example, how the rhythm of the day works with Rado, how do I shape with my hands, with Keen As, how do I make promises and keep them and build trust with Gibo, and then how am I just there in that sense of togetherness with Vunyo. So you get this real sense of belonging that comes through. And it's only then, if you think about when you go into a new environment and you start off, and often people will support you in getting that sense of belonging. They'll introduce you and they'll tell you what the rules are and they'll do that. So this is happening all the time as a mini cycle anyway. So the second 8, and this was the bit that made me go, oh, interesting, was given to me, and they said, what if leadership was the second stage? Learning to lead was the second stage, because the second 8 is so much about separation and challenging the status quo, releasing that which is no longer working, doing all of those things. And we often think about the second 8 as being these 8 of challenge, so the runes that come in are runes of challenge. But what's really become clear to me is that yes, obviously we can think about it in that sense, this sort of challenge, but it's also within that is that idea of saying, it's also where we step into leadership when we say, okay, with the Hagalaz rune, yes, all the crops have been destroyed, and yet this is the next step we're going to take. With the North's rune, yeah, I'm feeling really low right now, life is not going my way, and yet what do I do to step out of that? With the Easter rune, everything feels still and stagnant, and I'm tired, and I don't want to go on, I just want it to stay like the way they are, and yet. So there is a sense in which the challenges of the second 8 ask us to step into leadership and to learn ourselves and to understand, what makes us strong and how to overcome challenges, and that sometimes we have to do that. It's not always about standing in front of a group of people and saying, this is what you're not to do. It's about taking action yourself. So we learn to take action in the second 8. And then the third 8 becomes not leadership, remembering that Tia, who is the patron of the third 8, was a sovereign deity, and then chooses to take on another role as warrior, and then chooses to take on another role in sacrificing his arm, as the priest. It's allyship. When we step into elderhood, it's allyship. It's recognising that collectively we have to work together, that belonging isn't enough. It's not enough to feel safe, because the world is a tough place. Leading is not enough, because we can't all go that way, and we're all pulling in different directions, and somebody always wins and somebody always loses. It's allyship. It's bringing those things together and saying, okay, Tia, I'm going to do my part, and I'm trusting Odin over there that he's going to do his part. And it's choosing, your path and from different paths, and thinking about your allies and building allyship. And it's Frigg at building allyships with the Aesignor and building allyships with Freya. It's Odin working with Loki, who is a giant at the end of the day. And those are our places of power. So my invitation to you is to think about that and to think, okay, I need belonging. We all need belonging. We need somewhere where we belong and we feel safe. What is it that I choose to lead at the moment? And again, not necessarily about going, everyone else should do this, but taking action for yourself. Where are you leading? And what allyships are you building? And I just wanted to finish on this with a note that a lot of people that I work with in this community are more comfortable with the idea of allyship than they are with the idea of leadership. Let's just move straight into allyship, into working together, because that suits my principles and my values. I don't want to do what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I don't like hierarchy. I don't want to be in charge. I want us to make these decisions together. And what this tells us is that that's fine, but you can't actually have powerful allyship unless you've already mastered leadership, unless you already know where you're going and what your purpose is and what you will take a stand for and what you value. Because then we end up looking for allies who are actually leading us. You know, that we're giving them our power. We're saying, I don't want that responsibility, I'm going to give it to somebody else. You know? So that's not true allyship, so we have to master leadership first. So I shall stop sermonising at this point, and let's look at the runes that we've got. Hi Marie, lovely to see you. I know it's often difficult for you to get here because of time zone, so lovely to see you. So you have Kinaz, our rune of the creator. And I've been working a lot with Kinaz recently, so you know, it's a rune after my own heart. And because we're thinking about leadership and allyship, the runes to me are presenting a little bit of their power sides, but also their shadow sides. You know, and it's recognising that in order to master the rune, we need to have mastered both. And so Kinaz is talking about the way in which when we have that high Kinaz energy, the flip of the Kinaz energy that is from the creator is the victim. You know, that which has stuff done to it, because it's a rune of transformation. We have the creator and we have that which he or she creates. And so it's recognising that sometimes we are worked upon, you know, we are shaped and we are changed. And sometimes we are working with, and we are the one doing the shaping and the changing. And the choice is always there, no matter how hard it feels, to say, am I a victim, or am I looking at, you know, how am I being shaped? How am I being changed? You know, so any points where you feel like, ooh, I felt disempowered in this moment. I felt as if an event happened and I didn't feel in control. Is the shadow Kinaz, and the shadow Kinaz always brings, you know, the light of Kinaz with it. You know, so you can't separate the two. So it's saying, what's the potential for me to step into the role of the creator here, the role of the creator or the created, to recognise, you know, how I've been shaped, or what are the opportunities here for me to be shaped or to shape in the moment. So Chen, you have got Thurisaz. So Thurisaz, again, what I would look for here is, because Thurisaz brings perhaps what we would deem to be its more negative qualities on the outside. So people often say, you know, it's a rune of aggression and you know, this power, you know, a little bit frightening power. But underneath that Thurisaz, you know, you might almost say its shadow side is passion and heart and love. And so there it's looking for when fear, anger, shame, you know, these sense of challenge, you know, where we feel like maybe inadequate in the moment, or we feel deeply frustrated in the moment, or we feel that desire to retreat. There's always something underneath that. There is always something underneath that. So with anger, it's a boundary of mine has been crossed. Something that's valuable and important to me is making itself known in this moment, because if it wasn't, I wouldn't be angry. You know, and if I'm afraid, there's something that I want to protect. So what is it that I am protecting? And if it's shame, you know, there is underneath that the desire to be loved. So the question would be, how can I get the love that I need so that I can take those risks? You know, that I'm not governed by the shame. I'm governed instead by the love. You know, that desire for love. So it's looking in that way and saying, what's underneath those challenger moments. Erica, lovely to see you, and you have Northeast for the week. So again, a lot of people, it's actually probably the rune on my blog that if you go and you look at the Elder Futhark web pages there, it is the one that I get the most queries about. I always thought that it would be Hagalaz or Thurisaz, but it's not. People say, oh, I got Thurisaz, I got Northeast, and I'm just feeling really despondent about this because I recognise, you know, I've had depression, I've experienced the dark night of the soul, I've had this, you know, really hard time, and, you know, is this my life? Is basically what they're asking. So it's really, it seems to be the one that people find the most frustrating, which is, you know, makes sense given it's the rune of necessity. So again, it is saying that the Northeast rune brings on its outside. This time it's the challenges that we're experiencing, like within our bodies. It's not necessarily an external factor as you would get with Thurisaz or with Hagalaz. It's more of an internal factor, and it is your body or your emotions or your subconscious mind is saying, my needs are not being met. So again, it's looking underneath and saying, what are my needs here? What are my needs here? You know, we experience a dark night of the soul because there's a part of us that wishes to be reborn. You know? And north is souls. If you have north is in your birth runes, you know, wherever it is, it will come up, you know, in particular spheres of meaning. Wherever it is, you want to look for what is it that I need, and you want to become so much as attuned to your, particularly your body, bearing in mind that in particularly in the northern tradition, the body is seen as being our most sort of sensitive psychic receptor. You know, it's more trustworthy than the mind. Apologies, this cat just desperately wants to climb up the computer. Getting attuned to your body and your instincts and what your body is telling you in the moment. Do I like this? Do I not like this? Am I feeling okay? Am I not feeling okay? What does this tell me about my needs? So again, for all of these dreams, I'm really feeling like that's what they're asking us to do. They're saying, okay, what's the gift? It might feel like a challenger, but what's the gift, or what's the shadow that I need to look at that will help me to take my next journey into growth, my next step into growth? So with north is, it's just looking at attuning yourself even more strongly to your body compass there, I would say. For you, Erica, you know, I know that you're, you know, deeply enlightened soul. I have met you and I know this to be the case. So it might not be a case of, you know, where you're saying, oh, I'm feeling in terrible dark night of the soul all of the time. It's actually saying what's your next level in terms of the relationship with north, so that you can get even more deeply attuned to, you know, what your body is telling you as a part of your seeing, knowing soul. Cheryl, you have got algaes. And I think I was talking to somebody about this last week. I'm not sure if it was Middle Earth readings, in which case I apologise if I'm going to repeat myself. But with the algaes rune, reaching upwards, you remember I was talking about leadership, and algaes comes at the end of the second. It comes at the end of the second day. So we've been looking at leadership, and it's bringing us slowly towards that third date. And it's saying that when we call up, we're calling up to the gods, and we're saying, okay, I am looking for my divine compass, that guidance that I'm going to get from the, you know, from the gods, or from spirit, or from my spirit allies, or whatever it is, and recognizing them as sources of wisdom for us. And so algaes invites us into building that relationship with those aspects of ourselves, you know, those parts of us that are tied in to the divine, so we can hear them and we can work with them. But there is just a little bit of a hint there to watch out for with the algaes rune in terms of its shadow side, which is obviously not to give all of your power, just in the same way as, you know, don't give it to somebody else. It's saying also, you know, the northern tradition in particular always asks us to negotiate. So if a god comes along and says, I decree it that you will jump over this cliff, and you go, I'm not going to do that, they'll normally go, excellent, right on, so that's good, and now I'll give you the proper wisdom. I just wanted to check that you weren't going to do everything that I said, you know, that you've got like a mind of your own. And in the northern tradition, I have found that invariably, and obviously that was an extreme example, but invariably when I have had a new encounter with a deity or a spirit, and they've said, you know, this is your next growth zone, and I've gone, that's not my growth zone, that is my terror zone, and I'm not ready for it. I'm not going there. They have said, okay, then that's fine. You can do something else instead. Or that's fine because I was talking to you because I can see, you know, 2 lifetimes into the future, and you're going to be doing that then, and I was just sowing the seed now. You know, or this could be something that you're going to be doing in 10 years. So there's what they're inviting you into is to say, receive the information with the algaes rune, trust your readings, your seership. It's an excellent time to be working on that for yourself, but also be honing your discernment as to what you say yes to, what you say no to, and be comfortable that you're doing it, that it sits right with you. Similar to Tyr, you know, we were talking about Tyr and Tewaz, and sort of saying, you know, what's the next step that I can take that keeps me in integrity? Algaes gives me the guidance, but I still take the step, and I take responsibility for doing that. Diane, oh, I look very glamorous today. Well, thank you, Diane. Yeah, I'm wearing my very nice scarf here. This is the story of the scarf. So after I had my first child, I was feeling quite large and slightly different in shape. So I went to a personal shopper. I know, it was so cool. And they gave me stuff, and one of those things included this scarf. And so when I want to feel very good about it, I wear this scarf, and I like it very much. So thank you, Diane. You have got Tewas, but it's upside down. So we were looking at, we've been looking at Tia and Tewas, but with it being upside down, what I'm feeling into there, I'm certainly feeling that sense of connection with the earth, which I think has come up for you quite a lot recently. That sense of really, really pulling on the earth energy. The sense for me is that it is something perhaps practical at this point, that it's not necessarily about saying I'm going to journey into the earth, or even, you know, like extend my roots down into the earth, but it's saying if you can make physical contact with the earth in some way. It could be crystals, but I'm also feeling the soil of the land, you know, as being important. Any chance that you get to walk barefoot outside, it's literally saying, you know, go to the earth is what I'm getting. Sometimes that is what the Tewazrin does. It literally just points in the direction that it wants you to go. So I'm not getting a sense of like sacrifice, for example, of like Tyr allowing his right arm to be lopped off or anything like that. That's not what I'm getting. It's that sense of, you know, going to the earth, and again also trusting your instincts as well. Really, really important. And I think it's perhaps saying those two things are connected. So remember what you need. I'm thinking about that in Water's room. We've been talking about that. Remember what you need in order to feel at your best in terms of decision making, you know, instinctual, right decision making. And it may well be that it is that, you know, finding that connection with the earth, or, you know, surrounding yourself with, you know, paintings that you've done that you absolutely love. Whatever it is that you need to do, just think back in your mind and say, okay, in order to be my best self, in order to make decisions, what is it that I need? And you know, Tyr is suggesting that earth connection is important. Felicity, you have Ewaz. So Ewaz looks like a capital M. For those of you, I'm just going to see if I can find it, because it's one of those ones that people easily mistake for a different shape. Doesn't want to come. Oh, there we go. So this is the Ewaz rune, and people go, oh, why is it? It looks like a M. So obviously we have Manaz, which is the M rune. If you turn it on its side, I'm probably not doing that the right way around. I don't know which way it is for you. You can see that it looks a bit like a capital E there. So it's the Ewaz rune. It's doing a partnership. So again, because we've been talking about integration and collaboration and stepping into allyship, Ewaz is a rune of speed, Felicity. You know, it's that real sort of sense of speed and movement, and there's freedom as well. So in terms of thinking about allies, collaborators, people that you want to spend time with, think about those people who make you feel free, make you feel light. You know, don't allow yourself to be shackled by stuff that's going to weigh you down. You know, Ewaz wants momentum and movement, and because we're talking about, you know, how do you draw that in, maybe around sort of allyship, how do you do that? The answer is you do it through connecting with people who you know are going to help you to do that. Now this also brings in the shadow side of Ewaz, which we've been talking about, which is guilt. You know, if I spend time with these people, shouldn't I also spend time with those people? Because, you know, I don't want them to think that I like them more than them, or, oh, you know. And it's like you never meet up with anyone, because it's almost like there are too many people for you to do. And so an Ewaz often helps to counsel and recognise the difference between emotions like guilt and allyship and love, and the maturity of being able to say, well, actually, you know, the people who are supposed to be my allies, and the people who love me truly, I'm going to give a damn if I go out, you know, and enjoy myself with somebody else. They're going to be pleased for me, and they're going to know that their turn will come, you know, when it comes. So I hope that some of that resonates with you, Felicity. I've got a feeling that some of these are for a broader audience as well. So certainly the first half of the message was for you around lightness, but think into perhaps the shadow side as well and what that might mean. Suzanne, let me see. So Suzanne often is carrying lots of peoples. So morning, your rune is Uruz, which I know how lovely is that, because I know you've been doing some really strong connection with Uruz recently. So I would suggest perhaps actually just thinking about that theme of what does Uruz provide me with in terms of belonging. Now we were talking about that, maybe like that connection to the earth and nature. In terms of my leadership, when does it allow me to, how does it support me in leading? Like maybe bringing that Uruz presence, to others might be one of the ways in which that's the case for you. And in allyship, so in forging, again, it's not necessarily friendships, it's about saying, when I work on a project and I'm there with somebody else, or I'm in a space with other people, and I am bringing my own unique magic, and they are bringing their own unique magic, and we are working in allyship, what does my Uruz rune offer to that scenario as well? So it's sort of owning the power of your Uruz rune through those three lenses is what I'm getting for you at this time, Suzanne. Lisa is in Perthrow. So Perthrow is, we've got the rune of watery movement. So whereas Lagos is like rushing, fertilizing water, and it's the water, Perthrow is more the energy of weird itself, sort of weird weaving, and it brings within it laughter and change and being able to flow with the moment. I'm trying not to get entangled because I've been doing some stuff on the Perthrow rune, Lisa, so I want to feel into what that means for you. I always find the Perthrow rune interesting because the rune doesn't look anything like our modern capital P or small p either, and so people can say, oh, that's interesting. And I think what it's bringing to me is the idea that the rules of the game always change. So we need to be cognizant of when the rules of the game are changing, and we need to be cognizant of when we are being called to change the rules of the game. There was a game that the Vikings used to play. It's called Taffel. It's got a double barrel name. Taffel is the game, but there was a specific game that they used to play. So Taffel was like a gaming piece, and sometimes people think that actually Perthrow means Taffel. And there was a game that used to be played, and we don't know a huge amount about it, but what is gleaned is that whereas chess that sort of took over, from those Viking peoples and the northern peoples before that, they used to play Taffel. And in chess you have your two equal sides opposing. They are equally matched, and it's all about skill and wit, as to who's going to win and who's going to lose. Taffel was different. So Taffel had a player in the centre with a king in the centre, and then a small number of pieces around the king, and then the outside was the enemy side. And the idea was that the order and the structure in the centre gave the player who was at the centre an advantage, whereas sheer numbers gave the person on the outside the advantage. And you can see so much of that in terms of like the Aesir and the Jotun, and the idea of otherness. We need to, through our organisation and through our battle strategy and through the protection of our king and all of these things, we will prevail. So it's just interesting to look at it and say, at some point people went, oh, actually chess makes more sense to us. And it does make me think about, what games do we play in the modern world, and what do they tell us about the way that we think and the way that we think the world works? Because, games are not just about fun. They are about learning the way that the world works. So, Lisa, my invitation to you is to remember that you are not just a player of the game. You are also the creator of the rules. And knowing how the rules work and whether you have the opportunity to change them can be incredibly helpful. Now, Rebecca, we have Thurisaz. So we've already covered Thurisaz. So I'm just going to check with Chen. So is there anything more that's coming through for Thurisaz? As I'm speaking, I'm just sensing these little pinpricks of thorns. They're not fully grown yet. And when you go out into the brambles and you go out into the fields and you get those tiny little brambles, they're very, very small and green with tiny, tiny little prickles on them, and they hurt you a little bit, but not nearly as much as if you put your foot onto that darkened wood with all of the thorns on, but it's still pretty uncomfortable. I think what Thurisaz is offering you is an opportunity to say, where might those pinprick bits be that if you nip them in the bud, they won't turn into larger challenges. So it's, again, I was talking to Erica about looking at the nuance. So I would say with Thurisaz for you, it's about looking at the nuance of saying, okay, when do I sense that threat energy? And what can I do about it before it actually becomes a threat? So starting to work with the Thurisaz rune in that way and think about it in terms of the green tender shoots. And I'm really feeling as I speak, sensing that like in my hands and under my feet. So it is very much about energetic awareness. It might be about sort of people coming into your energy field, and I thought to myself, I was like, perhaps I can just give Rebecca the answer as to how that's going to work. No, that's not going to come, I'm afraid. So it's just sensing that difference between just forming green shoot Thurisaz energy, which is potentially not harmful and might even provide, if you think some brambles provide lovely fruit. So it's sort of saying, go and have a look at this and say, okay, how can I reap the fruits from this, but not allow the thorns to turn into those sort of dark, pointy thorns. So again, perhaps, whereas with Chen, I was talking about Thurisaz as in owning those emotions in yourself. For you, I think what's coming through is actually being able to recognise them in others. That their energetic field is telling you that something is wrong and off with them. And what is it inside them? What's the goodness inside them that's trying to protect, and trying to work with that so that the thorns don't grow anymore. Then Esther has got Rado. So Rado, the rune of movement, the road, rhythm. There is certainly a sense of following your own path within that. And I know we've been talking about divine timing as well, Esther. So Rado is one that, again, I think it's almost energetically saying, tuning into your pace when you are walking. Actually looking at your gait and your stance can be really, really helpful for attuning to that sense of divine timing and knowing when to move forward and how to move forward in such a way that, when we're walking and we always have our eye on the horizon a little bit so that we can just veer to one side if there's something's in the way, and we just do that, and we're looking at the ground, and if we need to, we modify our pace. To an outsider, it doesn't look as if we're doing anything because, our peripheral vision is working. So it's a real using walking as a meditative act and recognizing all the processes that you are going through. That sense of your center of gravity and where that is, how big your steps are. It's really suggesting to me that that's important, is walking meditation, real awareness on that. And that's it's a gift of some sort, I think, Esther. So I'm just going to leave that with you and travel with it as you will on that front. That's what's coming through. Troy, we have algaes, which again we have covered already. The only thing that's coming through, Troy, is as your algaes rune came up to me, it came up reversed. It's sort of like pointing downwards, which it may well have come the right way up for you because we're looking at like shadows and lessons within there. I think it's suggesting to me, again, when we look at guidance, I don't know which deities you work with, but there is that sense of maybe that there's a little bit of sort of earth energy, perhaps like an earth deity or your land that wants you to pay attention to it and is saying, if you build relationship with me, if you can build more of a stronger relationship with me, then I can reap more rewards for you, and that will act as a shield to external stuff coming in, like from other people or from society and words saying you should do this or you should do that. So it's almost offering itself as an anchor in that sense. To sort of say, through connecting with me, you're going to get a stronger connection to your instincts and your body. So it is algaes, but it's algaes that's coming to me is the earth connection that's really, really strong. And then saying once you've got that, it almost acts as a protector to the more conscious mind stuff, which might get a bit busy and hectic. Down into the earth is where to look. Darren, yes, we are. I think everyone is having. It sounds like everyone's having a lovely week at the moment, and I certainly am. Or it will get better once I get over my mini disasters thing and master divine timing. Your rune is Rado. So I've mentioned Rado, but it was quite specific, wasn't it, when I was talking about Esther and Rado and that sense of walking. So I think for you, there's a slightly different emphasis here for Rado. Because Rado is a rune of travel, and we can often look at it and we can think, oh, it's actually saying I'm going to go on a journey, like a physical journey. But I think what the rune is doing is, again, it's inviting you to look at all of these different facets and to say that Rado doesn't just talk about physical journeys, it's also about any form of evolutionary journey, and recognising that that has to be taken in its own time, and that what you're looking for is when external circumstances and your internal rhythm, your internal sense of yes, this is the right time for me too, and yes, this is the right journey for me too, and that's when they need to come together with that sense of allyship. So it's almost saying trust that you know when and where and how and who, and if somebody comes along and offers you an opportunity, it might be to travel, or it might be to do something, to evolve in some way, and it might be quite small, because the idea is that you're honing into your own instincts. Give yourself the moment to think, is this right for me? Because if it's right for them and for you, then the allyship is going to be strong. If it's right for them but it's not right for you, you're not going to have that same potency in terms of what could be delivered. So you might be better off saying, that sounds like a great opportunity, but it doesn't quite fit for me at the moment. So it's really tuning into your internal rhythm and looking for opportunities that Rado might provide. So it can be travel, or it can be learning, it's any form of journey. Looking for them and then really feeling into, is this the journey that I'm supposed to be on? Trish, hi! You've got Thurisaz, and Thurisaz I think twice now. So is there anything new that's coming through for you? I don't think so. I think maybe you want to listen to both of them, Trish. The idea of mastery of your own inner knowing, like bringing curiosity to what you're feeling, but also bringing curiosity to what other people are feeling, or what you're experiencing from them, and looking at what is behind. So this idea of, with Thurisaz, we can often see the thorn, and I always say, try to see the thorn but also the rose, or the thorn but also the blackberry, whatever it is, because Thurisaz always offers that as well, and we forget that because we look at the protective, defensive function of the thorn, but we forget to look at what is it protecting. So for you, it's going to be awareness of both. Rin, lovely to see you. So your rune this week is Uru. So I think, we've covered that with Suzanne. Is there anything else that's coming through? Because we looked at the 3 areas, didn't we? Belonging, leadership and allyship with Suzanne. What I would suggest, Rin, for you with Urus is, again, because the shadow side is coming quite strongly through for me with some of these runes now, is that sense of Urus can represent both, the deep land and the channel through which our weird flows. So it tends to be things that are very fixed. And what it's asking, and I think this is possibly not just because we were looking at Perfro and Tafel and things, but because we've been looking at Frey and the idea of natural law. It's saying just be really, really careful as to what either you or other people are assuming what must be, what the rules are. This must be done because of this. And sometimes this must be done because I said I would, or this must be done because I thought that you said you would. And our words are powerful. But that doesn't mean that we can't unwind our words, that we can't say, in the past, I did this in this way. But moving forward, that's not going to be the way that I approach this. So you can do some resetting for yourself, you can do some resetting for other people. So it's looking at those things that either you or other people believe to be truth, or to be, this is just like the natural way that it has to be, and really digging into that and saying, is that definitely the case, or is that just something that we've sort of together agreed that we would do? So here's is your Urus rune. So when it's this way up, it becomes like the drinking horn. It becomes like promises that we have made to each other. And even Urus, particularly at these times when I've been talking about stepping into power, and how do we form allyship, and is it the most powerful allyship, or are we giving our power to others? Even oaths can be unbound, as long as we do that in integrity. And again, I was talking about the story of Tyr. Tyr, who is a god of truth and integrity. And yet, he bound his best mate, which felt awful to him. And yet he did it because he knew that if he didn't do that, the consequences would be much worse than the breaking of his very, very dear friendship. You know, so he broke one vow, like the vow of friendship, in order to hold up a truth that was more important to him, namely the survival of the ACA, you know, of which he was a member. And so it's looking at that very carefully and saying, you know, even the strongest of oaths can be broken if necessary, and looking at that for yourself and, you know, what other people are thinking too. Rima, you've got Wunyo. Wunyo! I always have to say that when I see Wunyo. So with Wunyo, I've mentioned the first state as being that belonging, you know, that feeling of just joy and belonging and ecstasy and happiness. And so Wunyo is really calling to you at this point and saying, yeah, there's all this stuff going on. Ignore it. It's fine. Go and do something that you like. That is the most important thing that you can do. Going right back to what I was saying in the beginning about being yourself is more important than anything else. So take that as your mantra for this week. Prioritise the things that give you pleasure and make you feel, you know, marvellous and wonderful and joyful. And in doing that, what it's saying is that in doing that, you will then be able to step into leadership and allyship perhaps in a different way. So honour yourself and the things that give you pleasure. You know, and maybe ask yourself the question, what if my purpose and my desires were the same? That'd be pretty cool. Suzanne, you're asking, has everyone in this room been from the first date? I don't think so, but it's been really, really interesting. It's definitely come through as a really strong theme through these readings, this particular Middle Earth readings, looking at the differences between the first, the second, and the third 8. I don't think we've had as many from the second date. We've had Northies, but we haven't had as many. We've had Northies and we've had Algies, but there's definitely been some interesting patterns there. Let me see. Marie says, thank you. Cheryl says, really interesting as always. No problem, Cheryl. You can catch up later. Erica, attuning to my body. Wonderful. That's great. Diane says, we'll do some planting and repotting this afternoon. Yay, go Diane. Darren says, thank you. I hope everyone has a good week. Looks like we are complete. So it's been lovely to see everybody. We are finishing our month with Frey and Natural Law this week. So for those of you who are Inner Circle members, do come and join me for our Hygge session on Thursday. If you are not yet an Inner Circle member, it is very easy to join, and you can join us for our next month of working, and you can also go and review all of our classes for this month and all of the others that we've had for, we've been going for more than 2 years now, so you can go and have a look at those. You know, the themes do tune in a bizarre way. I don't know why. I'm always surprised when they do, bearing in mind that the themes, I set them at for the year and we do them all. They always seem to align with our readings. So, you know, if you are not a member of the Inner Circle, I would strongly advise you to sign up through the coming month and enjoy the next round of work we're going to do together. I'll be telling you more about that in the following week, and we will, as always, send out our newsletter to let you know what is happening. Lovely to see everybody. Take care, and see you all again very soon.